I will call the meeting of the East Lansing Planning Commission for October 23rd to order, and I'll ask David to take roll.
Chairperson Bowman. Vice Chair Boyle.
Here.
Commissioner Cahill. Commissioner Downs.
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Here.
Commissioner Watson.
Here.
Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Wolf.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
All right. We have an agenda that's been presented. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Downs and seconded by Commissioner Sullivan to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. And we also were provided with a copy of draft minutes for our October 9th, 2019 meeting. Are there any comments or changes to those minutes? If not, how about a motion?
I'll move approval. Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Downs to approve the October 9th, 2019 minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. All right. Report from the Form-Based Code Committee.
Well, let's see, I guess I'm the only representative here. Did we meet since our last meeting? I'm not sure we did or not. What we've been working on is the use tables. I think we did have a meeting,
16th.
2 days after our last meeting here. And we continue to work on the allowed uses in the various frontages there. We are meeting again a week from Friday.
Good. All right. The Hannah Community Center Study Commission. We have not met since our last meeting. However, the committee has finalized their report and recommendations to City Council, and those were presented to City Council at the discussion-only meeting of Council last night. They're also available on the City of East Lansing website. There's a lot of work that went into these. There's 100 pages of attachments and some wide-ranging recommendations from the committee. But I think that has actually finished the work of the committee, so this will be our last report. Staff reports.
Thank you. Just to kind of piggyback on the form-based code comments, the staff presented an update to the City Council last night on the progress of the committee, focused mostly on the timeline, kind of bringing them up to speed on the activity thus far, and that our projection for a draft document is projected to be delivered to Council in December, and providing a couple months for them to absorb and provide their own comments and suggestions for it. And then once there's consensus on and essentially permission to release the document, we'll take it out to the public for comments in February, March. Also, just a heads up that we received applications, 3 applications for rezonings. One at 322 or 3225 West Road. That would be the proposed medical marijuana provisioning center location to rezone the property from RA to B4. They had originally pursued B2, but withdrew that, favoring the B4 district. Also, we've received a rezoning request for 3118 West Road for an eventual office building, rezoning that to B5. And then a conditional rezoning request for 341, 345 Evergreen. That would be the Park District Building C, because they're changing the site plan and special use permit, amending that. It's necessary to update the conditional rezoning. That's my report.
So that has a conditional rezoning, and when they change the plan and need a new special use permit, then the conditional rezoning doesn't apply.
Yeah, I think the intent was for it to potentially roll with any amendment, but the way it was worded, it was kind of tied to a site plan, a specific site plan, so it's necessary to revise
So
that.
probably looking at another conditional rezoning.
Yes, they've applied for that, yep.
Any questions of staff? Okay, commissioner announcements. No announcements. All right. This section of the meeting is for communications from citizens. Anyone out in the gallery who wants to address the Planning Commission regarding any planning issue or anything on the agenda, you can come forward now. If you want to speak regarding one of the, I think there's 3 public hearings tonight. If you want to speak regarding one of the 3 public hearings, you can wait until the public hearing itself to speak, and that's often easier. But you could speak now if you don't have time to stay through the public hearings. And if you're speaking about something other than one of the 3 public hearings, then now is the time to speak. So with that in mind, are there any comments? All right. On to our public hearings.
Okay. So the first public hearing tonight is for 115 Albert Avenue, proposal for a restaurant including alcohol sales. Tonight we have our senior planner, Darcy Schmidt, that will provide a presentation.
Thank you. The applicant is requesting a special use permit to serve alcohol in a new restaurant that they're proposing. The restaurant is being proposed in a space that was once used for another restaurant that was a takeout, sit-down restaurant called Menace Joint. Because of those circumstances, there will not be required a traffic study, since the expectation is that there won't be additional traffic trip-ins that will be created through the special use permit with the proposal that we have in front of you tonight. This application will go in front of the DDA tomorrow afternoon for review. The zoning for this particular application is B3, City Center Commercial District. This application is sharing a liquor license with the Black Cat Bistro. They're under the same ownership. They will not share food back and forth or alcohol back and forth. They will share general manager and share a chef. The particular space within the new proposal is 2,740 square feet. They're proposing a small addition on the back to accommodate second access for handicap accessibility. In the front, they're proposing a garage entry for open air access or open air feeling for the restaurant, and also to have access to the 3 tables that they're proposing out on the sidewalk for outdoor seating. The police have, in their review, have requested that if they're going to have outdoor seating, that the rail that they propose around the seating be permanent in nature, and that any railing or fencing that's around the outdoor seating, there still remains ADA accessibility on the sidewalk. The occupancy that was established by the building official was 108 occupancy for the entire restaurant. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So this is, you can use a single state liquor license for both restaurants, but they need 2 separate SUPs in order to operate a restaurant that serves alcohol in the city of East Lansing.
If they're separate units, yes.
Okay. It's not that we're amending the existing SUP, it's that we're
Correct.
doing a second SUP.
Correct. They're separate restaurants, but they're using the same liquor license.
And how will we determine whether or not, once they've established the outside seating area, whether that will leave enough space for handicapper access?
They're required to have a right-of-way permit, and during the application process, that is one of the reviews that occurs. They have to have the seating area and the sidewalk shown in scale, so that will be measured to make sure that that's accommodated.
And they won't get an outdoor seating permit if they
That's correct.
don't leave
That's correct.
sufficient space.
That's correct.
Is the only connection the front of the building, even with the addition?
Yes, that's the only connection is through the vestibule in the front.
Okay.
Commissioner Wolf?
I have some questions about the seating and the occupancy, and maybe it's partially for you and maybe partially for the applicant, but the staff report says it provides seating for 112 persons, but their floor plan actually shows seating for 106, for fewer than what it says in the staff report.
That would be my mistake. I must have not changed the number with the new application.
Okay. And then they show an additional 9 occupants, which are employees. So with their 106 seats and 9 additional, they show a total of 115 occupants. So does that mean they have to remove some of the seating in order to be compliant?
Right, they would only be able to have 108 total occupants.
And if 9 of those are employees, then, so they would have to cut their seating back to
Correct.
99? And that, okay. Thank you.
And the seating doesn't increase, the allowable seating doesn't increase just because you opened the outdoor seating area,
That's
does it?
correct.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Is the applicant here? Anyone have questions for the applicant? Oh, I thought so. All right, why don't you come up?
Good evening. I'm Michael Brown from the law firm of Carl and Edwards Brown, and I'm the liquor licensing attorney for E&G Connections LLC, which is the liquor license holder at Black Cat Bistro, which will be the same liquor license we're using for this new space.
And I'm Mark Fineout, and I prepared the plans, so if you have any questions for the building or site, hopefully I can address those.
My name is Executive Chef Jose Romero. I'm designing the concept for the new restaurant.
My name is Josh Martinez. I'm the general manager of Black Cat Bistro, and I'll be general managing the new restaurant that we're speaking of.
All right. Well, I think we have some questions for you, so if you can all stay up near the podium. And if you can make sure you fill out a card with your name and address and give it to us before you leave so we have it for our records. Commissioner Wolf, I know you said you had some questions.
Yeah, well, actually, I was hoping, do you have a presentation about your plan here, or nothing you want to tell us about your restaurant or your plans?
Well, I can.
Most applicants are anxious to tell us, so.
I can address a couple questions that were raised regarding the building and the sidewalk. So we'll have 8 feet left over on the sidewalk after we do the patio, which is ADA, compliant. And we're asking to put an addition on the back so we can have a second exit that's required by the building code. And we're also fine with the 108 occupant load that was determined by the building official. Another question was, we proposed to put a overhead door in front, and that overhead door would be right where the existing foundation is now. So we wouldn't be reducing the width of the sidewalk by putting that door in that location.
I believe we included a copy of the proposed menu in the document, so you should have that in your material. Sort of lays out what the restaurant concept is. Obviously, the chef's here if you have specific questions about the menu or the concept. As was indicated earlier, although they will share a liquor license, the concepts are different and distinct and intended that way, which is not a new idea. This idea of shared space and multiple concepts under one ownership exists in several locations throughout the state of Michigan. So it's not really all that unique. It does help to create some economies of the operation. It does bring in different clientele. It allows for people to experience different kinds of food and yet be in the same general area. So that's the general idea behind having the multiple concepts in one building under one ownership.
Go ahead.
I have a question about bike racks. And the first one is, does Black Cat Bistro have any bike racks?
Us personally
Yep.
don't have bike racks, but there are bike racks that are in the vicinity of where we're located at in the park area, right on the other side of the fountain that we overlook.
Yeah.
There was quite a bit of bike racks there at one time, but then when construction happened with the Center City project, they took some of them away and brought back only maybe one or two, and I don't know what happened to the rest of the bike racks, to be honest with you.
In the park, you mean? They
Yeah, in
took
the
some
park
out
area.
of the park
Yeah,
during
they-
that construction? Are there any others to the east along that sidewalk anywhere? I should have gone and looked myself, but I didn't.
No, there are no bike racks
Okay.
anywhere between Black Cat and all the way past Hop Cat, all the way past.
Into the plaza.
Into the
I guess
plaza.
where the first one shows
Yeah.
up. Okay. I was kind of disappointed. I mean, I see that you're going to comply with the two required bike parking places by putting a bike rack in the back of the building.
Mhm.
And I can see that'd be useful for employees, but people who come there, as customers probably aren't going to find it. It'd be nice to have something out front, but I see the problem with the sidewalk there. It's difficult to put one in.
Well,
So,
since we are, I'm sorry to interject, but since
Yeah,
we
go
are,
ahead.
we are both running this new restaurant concept and Black Cat, we do have customers, guests, who attach their bikes to our fence. So we allow them to do that as much as possible. Sometimes they go to the back of the patio and attach it right there. Anywhere that they can do it, we say, hey, sometimes they put it like right by our window that's right by the host stand. Of course, the host can't see it, but they can, as long as it's out of the aisleway of somebody coming out of the patio, we're more than welcome to tell someone you keep it right there. So there's spots, we don't tell anyone, hey, you can't put your bike and lock it next door onto our fence, no, because they're coming in to eat, so.
all right, well, that's good to
They're
hear.
comfortable to want to be able to see their bike right there, they want it right there, so. And at one time, we've had probably 8 bikes all connected right there, so it's no problem at all.
All right,
So.
thanks.
And
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned it, but I think there's a bike rack by the Grove Street ramp right there too. But what Commissioner Wolf was getting at, could you give us a brief presentation overview of what the purpose of the restaurant is, what the atmosphere is going to be like, the food you're going to be serving? I know it's in the packet, but I'd just love to hear from you.
Yes. The concept itself is still in the beginning stages, but the concept itself is a Spanish-inspired sandwich tortilla using Mexican cuisine. Spanish and Mexican cuisine for the longest time, for hundreds of years, has been fusing, Mexican cuisine with European cuisine. So the concept that I'm developing is a sandwich, a fast, affordable sandwich restaurant bar that can cater to everybody, using European-style breads like French baguettes, Spanish telera bread. So something really unique using Southern Mexican ingredients. So you'll see a lot of the moles, the sauces, the ingredients from Southern Mexico. Not a lot of things that you see now with mainstream Mexican food around here. So it's like the opposite spectrum of that type of cuisine. So a lot of people around here sees the tacos, the wet burritos, and all that stuff. That's more like Southwest Tex-Mex style food. Mine would be more European Mexican, which would definitely be different enough in the city of East Lansing. And actually, at the tasting that I did for a lot, some of the employees and the owners and some of the other, people that we know, was just dynamite. People were like, oh my God, we've never seen this style of food. We understand the mix, but, you see it and, Los Angeles, you see it in, Chicago, Boston, New York, but you don't see that here in East Lansing yet. And it's coming, the trends, the whole taco trend is, it goes up and down, but now you'll see the influx of Spanish sandwiches starting to take over. So I just want to be on the forefront of that, and when the opportunity presented itself to develop something next door to Black Cat with a restaurant that's affordable but with a real thought on the gourmet ingredients and presentation, and something that East Lansing doesn't have. I was all about stepping up and creating a concept that would fit well in East Lansing, and I'm really excited about it. So, any
Yes.
questions?
And to piggyback on what he's talking about is with this food, he's the creator of the food. As many of you guys have probably been at Black Cat. He creates the food, I run the place, and I create the drinks. So when it comes to this new concept, I'm gonna be creating the drinks. And what we're gonna be doing is we're going to create the first mezcal bar in the state of Michigan. Mezcal is the cousin to tequila. So the cocktails are gonna be made with different types of mezcal. I'll be making different types of margaritas with mezcal. I made a mojito a few months ago that few people tried. Different types of stuff. Yes, we'll have like maybe one vodka, one rum, for those who don't want to drink mezcal, but it would be a mezcal bar. I know a lot of places in Lansing are trying to go towards bourbon bars, so we figured, let's do something unique, something different. Mezcal, no one's doing it. Of course, the beer would be Mexican beer, Pacifico, Modelo Negro, Dos Equis, stuff like that. I hope what we've said answers some of the questions you guys are looking at. And like he said, we are still trying to create this creature right now. That's what I'm going to be doing for the next few months, is creating the cocktail menu.
I might have missed it, but what are the hours going to be?
Was it on our thing? Yeah. 11 to 2? 11 to 2. 11 a.m. to 2.
AM.
2 a.m., yes.
Okay.
Is that the same hours as Black Cat right now? Just gonna be
Yes,
consistent? Okay.
yes, be the same.
And then, I don't know if you delved into this at all, but is the atmosphere going to be pretty similar to Black Cat Bistro, more of a upscale dining experience? Is going to be any TVs, things like that?
In the new place,
Yes.
there will be TVs
Okay.
in the new
Yeah.
restaurant.
It will be a younger, more, hip atmosphere to attract some of the students that we don't attract now with Black Cat. So, and the price point will also be different. So that way we will attract, everybody. And right now, with Black Cat, it's very selective. It's, it's upscale. It's, so we figured right next door we could do something a little bit more casual, a little bit more friendly, a little bit more hip, a little bit younger, just to appeal to everybody. Somebody that wants to come in for a quick drink and a sandwich, boom, you can come in and do that. You don't have to come in and have the full service, feel of like a Black Cat,
And we're looking to hit the residents who don't feel like they don't have the money, or they're not dressed accordingly, or somebody who's looking for something that is, like Chef Jose said, quick and simple and cheap. Because this is going to be something that's going to be more affordable. And we're looking at, yes, people sitting down and eating, but we're also looking at people doing this, come in, get the order and leave, or doing takeout, or ordering for carry out, stuff like that. So
Well, it certainly it looks interesting, and I understand this is a preliminary menu, but it looks like it might present some challenges to you in getting all of the fresh ingredients that you may want, because you have some rather exotic things here. But-
with my food vendors, I've already sought a lot of them out. We're going to be using Cherry Capital, Earthy Delights, which is a local company that supply out of Traverse City that will be supplying a lot of the gourmet stuff that I'm going to be bringing in. So we will be using a lot of local vendors, a lot of people that can get me all the stuff, 2-day ship, maybe 3-day ship FedEx. So I'm working all that out right now. So it's real exciting for me to be able to get all these new ingredients and give East Lansing another boost.
All right, well, is there anything anybody wants further from staff on this? So, oh, yes, thank you. Is there any comments from the public? So I see none, so we'll close the public hearing. See you back.
This item will come back probably at our next meeting.
And I see I missed the communications on the agenda.
Yeah.
So we'll back up and do that right now. We have 4 items. Yes, if you would.
So we have 4 items on our agenda here. The first is regrettably received resignation from Commissioner Leo Sell, who has an ongoing conflict with this time. So his resignation was effective at the time of submission. So it's been a little while since we've had a vacancy. We've had a fairly stable board. So appreciate his service and of course wish him the best and thank him for his participation and support. We also have a communication from the applicant of the Hub 2 proposal on Bogue Street to request postponement on consideration and action on their application. They're not requesting withdrawal, but they'd like to postpone action until such time as the amendments to the East Village are settled. We also have a letter from Musselman Realty in support of the proposal that we just heard regarding 115 Albert. And then we also have a communication from Mr. Robert Mavrogordata. I'm not sure I said that completely, regarding 341 Evergreen Avenue.
And we don't need to take any action on the Hub 2, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Thank you. Any questions about any of those communications? On to our next public hearing.
Okay, so this item is a public hearing for a senior development, housing development at 6290, 6330, 6350, and vacant land on Abbott Road to develop a 3-phase development consisting of an assisted living and memory care building, independent living villas, and a 4-story independent living building. And with that, we have with us today our Community Development Analyst Jake Parcell to do the presentation on this item.
All right. Good evening, everyone. As Dave described, this is a 3-phase development, a total of 160 units on Abbott Road. The total site is 23 acres. It's currently vacant except for a single-family home and associated pole barn / garage structure. It's south of the Aquatic Center and just north of Gaslight Village to give you a frame of reference for its location. The site, although being currently undeveloped, does have some wetlands on it. There are attached comments in your packet from the city's Environmental Services Administrator indicating that there are wetlands that will be disturbed. I think there are still almost 2 acres of wetlands still on site following development though. The applicant, moving on, has only provided a trip generation letter. We need a traffic assessment and a traffic letter to further discuss the traffic impact that will happen on site. There are comments in there from engineering referencing that. For other applicable ordinances and regulations, The earliest they could get on the Commission at the Environment and get their wetland verification is November 18th. They'll also have to abide by the city's universal design standards, which will happen during the building and zoning review of the site plans. For reference, these were rezoned from RDD, which is Meridian Township, multifamily low density, in April of 2019. There was a condition on the conditional rezoning that 100% of all residential units in the project have at least one resident that is 55 years of age or older. And the final thing is, in the plan, it did not appear to be indicated that there were any electric vehicle chargers. Per our ordinance that I believe was adopted this year, they are required to have 7 on site. That's the only non-conformity with anything in the RM8 zoning district. Questions?
Any questions? Commissioner Wolf.
Since you just mentioned it, I think the number of EV chargers for this should be 6, not 7, the way it's written. It's for every 50, for the first 50, you're required to have 1, and then for each additional 50 parking spaces, you have 1 more.
Okay.
So, and they have 310 parking spaces. So I think at 300, they're required to have the 6, and they wouldn't be required to have 7 unless they went up to 350 parking places.
Okay.
You said?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think I evaluated it as just rounding up, so I will take note of that.
I'm pretty sure that's the way it was written, the way it was intended, that you had to have go up the full 50 increment before the next one
Perfect.
was required.
No, that's very helpful then.
I have a question about the conditional rezoning. Was that done with Meridian Township?
Yeah, and in the packet, there should be a letter from Meridian Township as
that.
they reviewed this as well. It was a rezoning application to go from RDD in Meridian Township to RM8 for our zoning code for this development. The other conditions of approval were typical for rezoning. The only one that really applies here would be the 100% of units having someone 55 and up on site.
For assisted living and memory care, you think that, well, probably 50, they're going to be 55 plus anyway, but I suppose it's conceivable that someone might be suitable for assisted living and under 55, and if that's so,
Yeah.
they're going to have to find an older person to live with them.
I think it's actually 100% of all residential units have at least one person who's 55 years of age or older. So I misread that, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So the rezoning was, so this is part of the 425 area of Meridian Township, and in that agreement for this particular property, it's required the rezoning has to be ultimately approved by a joint council between Meridian Township. So you have to form that council specifically for that action, so that's how that was done.
And that's how that particular rezoning was approved?
Yes.
By the joint,
Correct.
whatever, joint
Yep,
commission?
Joint council.
Joint council.
And I would add to that it was a conditional rezoning. They didn't want to do an unconditional RM8 because then that would have allowed many types of development that they did not want. So they wanted a proposal, and they got a proposal that they were happy with, and that became the conditional rezoning. I have a question about the letter from engineering raises the issue of curb cuts on Abbott Road. There's 3 shown on the plans, and engineering thinks that's too many.
Yes.
And my question is, how is that going to be resolved? That might be partially a question for the applicant, but the reason I ask is if they build phase 1, that will have 2 curb cuts as it's designed right now. And then if at that point they're told they cannot have any more, that could have a significant impact on the remainder of the phases. So it'd be nice to get that resolved before they start phase 1.
Yes, I am assuming they have to go to the Transportation Commission once they get their traffic assessment done, and they will work with engineering to resolve that at that point.
Okay.
But that's, since that part of the traffic information's missing here, it's still has to be updated.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems is their northernmost curb cut is quite close to the drive for the aquatic center. I think that's probably one of the concerns that engineering has.
Yes.
Do you have something?
Yeah, I would fully expect that through that, like as Jake mentioned, through that process, it'd be iterative with Transportation Commission and engineering to resolve that issue before they give a referral to the Planning Commission.
And I was
I would
hoping
expect that that would get worked out before.
before they're even approved, not
Yes.
only before they start phase one construction,
yeah.
but
I
it'll be
would,
part of the plan.
I would hope it gets, and we will push for that this gets resolved before the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to
okay.
council.
Go ahead.
And then one more, a question about the phased construction. I wanted to know how the parking in particular, and also I guess the electric vehicle chargers, how that's handled with the phased construction. Do you calculate the amount of parking required for the phase one housing? And then are they required to put in that amount of parking in phase one? So I didn't count it up to see if they build the area they showed, whether that has enough parking for the phase one buildings. I don't know if you see what I'm getting at.
Yes, so all the parking would be broken down by units as per our zoning codes, so they would be required to put a sufficient parking for each phase of the development into the overall project.
Okay.
I believe that's how it would work.
And what about the traffic study? Is the traffic study done with the first phase, the information from the first phase of development, or with all of the proposed development?
I am entirely unsure of that one. We can check with engineering on how they would like the traffic study to be displayed.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain the trip generation estimate was for the full three-phase
Yeah, that was.
development. And as such, we would expect that that whatever study and assessment they bring back would be equally, we wouldn't, I don't think we would accept a
phase one?
Yeah, a development proposal with only part of it being analyzed.
Yeah, I'm assuming as well, since approval will be for the entire project.
Thank you.
And we'll double check the phasing and parking counts per phase, because I'm not sure we broke it down that far, but I think that's a good point, that we need to make sure there's adequate parking per phase.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point.
No, it wasn't in here, so that is a very good point.
And one more question. I think I know the answer to this, but the staff report doesn't say explicitly that this includes a special use permit. The only thing that's triggering the special use permit is the assisted living component of this. Is that correct? Because the independent living buildings would be allowed by right.
I believe the height as well may trigger the threshold, but I don't remember exactly where that cutoff is. Because in the rear and the max building height for sites that are over 20 acres with an approved special use permit, you can build up to a certain height, which is 6 stories. They're proposing 4, but I can't remember where the cutoff is for that.
Okay.
But-
Could we have that in the staff report next time as to exactly what is requiring the special use permit? Or,
Yep.
if there's more than one thing, list those?
Yes.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay.
Is the applicant here?
Thank you.
I have my card.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dave Bayless. I'm the applicant as well as the owner of the proposed community. If it's all right with you, I'd love to just tell you a little bit about my company and what we're planning, show some pictures. I can go as slow or as fast as you like on that, and just to give you a sense of who we are and what we're planning.
All right, go ahead.
I'll just get started while we open that. I can't get it. There we go. So my company's Provision Living. We're a regional owner and operator of assisted living and independent living communities. We're based in St. Louis. We're privately held. We've been in business for over a dozen years. I have two partners and myself, and like I said, we've been in business 12 years. We've really focused on the Midwest in building our communities. We focus on development, finance. We own it, and we also operate it. And I'll come back to what I believe the importance of that is. I think we're unique in this industry. There are a lot of very large senior housing companies, and then there are quite a few small, and we fit in the middle somewhere. And we're unique in that we have the wherewithal to build communities like this and provide the services that the seniors in many communities need. But we're also small enough where we're not that far from the communities, not just, I don't really mean physically, but just from an operation standpoint where we really can have an influence over the communities. We peaked out at about 40 communities a number of years ago. We are now at 15. We made the decision that it really just felt like it was too many. We were getting too far from our communities and the residents and the staff, and really made a concerted effort to focus just on the Midwest. And these are our 15 communities right now, and then the handful that we're working on building. As I said, we're really all about the residents and taking care of the residents, as well as the staff, as well as our neighbors. And as I indicated earlier, we are developers, but we also are operating these communities and are part of the community. So it's very important to us. Spend a lot of time understanding where we want to build and the services that we want to provide, and that we're going to be successful. And then time in connecting with the municipalities as well as the surrounding neighbors. I believe you're all familiar where the location is. It's roughly 23 acres, about 2 miles north of here, just south of the Aquatic Center. As was previously mentioned, we went through. It was part of the 425 agreement. This is the what was presented at that meeting. It's changed since then because this was just a concept, and that was approved in March of this year. And this is the plan that's in front of you. And what I'd like to do is talk a little about what we're focused on. As I mentioned, we're assisted living and independent living community. The assisted living building will be planned as 2 stories, roughly 90,000 square feet, and just over 100 resident units. And then the independent part would be a 4-story building, roughly 185,000 square feet and 160 apartments, as well as the duplexes or villas that are shown in the back. The services that we provide are what we consider best in class, and it's really about the comfort of the residents and the services and the amenities that they're looking for to have a really enriched life where all their services can be found in the building. But we also have transportation because we encourage the residents and the resident families to make sure that their loved ones are taking part in all the various activities that the community has to offer. And we're a bit of a hybrid. We are a business, and we do provide employment, and we do provide to the tax base. But really at the heart, we consider ourselves a residence where seniors live. And that's where our focus is taking care of them. We talk a bit about phasing. I think it's apparent in the plan, but the red portion that I've circled is the southern building would be the assisted living community. And I have some pictures and things of similar communities that we've built that that we'll flip through. And then a handful of the villas that surround it. That is the first portion that we will start with, or that we would like to start with. And then depending on how the residents in the community receives the product, we'll either build the other independent living building or the villas, just depending on how lease up goes and the response to the community. So then I outline, just to make it easier to, if we need to reference it, the blue section would be the remainder of the villas, and then the independent living would be the green up at the upper portion of it. But like I said, our phase one is starting with that lower building with a handful of the villas. Yes, sir.
What you're showing us in the red area is larger than what's shown in our plans. On the
Yes,
south end.
we were just talking about that in the back of the room, and I realized that wasn't the case. Your plans show 12
Right.
resident units. This shows
on
20.
the north and the west, but not that southern.
Yes, sir. And this shows 22. Our preference would be to start with 22. I know we've applied for 12, and the reason that's a little bit flexible, and if you would like us to lock it down, we can. What we like to do with the villas is build them as need. Once the villas are built, and then once they're filled, we'd like to build them in groups and just continue to go from there. And so while the initial concept that we like to focus on in assisted living is to start with a dozen villas, I think my preference would be, as we build this first phase, is to add to include another 10 on top of that. And then what we would do is really add a handful at a time as we lease them up, because we're able to build them in about 120 days, and somebody can lease them, and then we can turn them from there. So that's why there's a difference. And we can change, if it makes a difference for our next meeting, we can change it to 22 if that's a concern. Great catch. This is a community that we just finished in July. It's in West Bloomfield. The community that we'd like to build here is very similar to this. One of our focuses, and I'm going to show you a couple of exteriors. Our focus isn't just to take our building and build it everywhere. We really like to focus on the community and what the architecture is like and what the municipality is looking for. So it really blends in as a residential community. There's just an aerial shot of that. There's a very similar building, except for the tail that's off the back. This is the exact building that's on your plan, but when we talked about phasing, we would start with just the front of that, and not necessarily the tail. This is obviously a similar building. It's in Grand Rapids. It was also built this year, and that's in the middle of lease up. And you can see we have green space and walking paths and all the amenities and outdoor and indoor amenities that our residents like. One of the things we pride ourselves on, and what we call is understated elegance in the communities, and in most cases, especially in an area like this, the lobby, we really, we have a 2-story lobby where it really feels, it feels welcoming. We have a concierge there, and then other amenities like the bistro, and this is a demonstration kitchen. We have a theater, we have a salon, we have exercise area, we have transportation. We have all those various amenities. Here's an example of a resident room. We'll have studios, as well as 1-bedrooms, as well as 2-bedroom resident rooms, as well as the villas that are also on the plan. This is another community in Lexington. The reason I put this up here was you can see the building is very different. It doesn't necessarily belong, what I would say, in this community or in Grand Rapids, but in this Lexington area, in the area that we developed, this is appropriate. So that's what, from an exterior standpoint. And you can see it has a lot of the same features, but we've, not just the horse that's over the mantle, but we've designed it to really fit into that area. And these are just a few pictures where you can see the amenities and the finish, and as well as the outdoor spaces, to be sure that the residents and their families can enjoy the outdoor spaces and resident rooms. This is a community in St. Louis. Again, you can see it's a bit different. We designed that to fit. This was right down on Main and Main and Webster Groves, and we designed it to fit into that area. This is also in St. Louis, the outdoor space, and this is in Columbia, Missouri. Again, you can see it's a bit different, but very appropriate for those areas. So that's it on the pictures and who we are and what we do. I'm happy to answer any questions. We also have a number of folks here if we want to get into the technical pieces of the civil plan or the construction of it. We can address that.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, is that house just to the south of the aquatic center? That's considered part of the proposal, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does this require any particular license from the state, from LARA?
It requires there's a licensing process that we go through for the assisted living community. So the building has to be designed within those standards for the licensure. And then at the end of the process, the licensing body comes in and looks at the building as well as our records and our staffing and all of our programs. And then they can come and do an inspection whenever they like. Typically it's once a year, but they can come at any point. So the assisted living building, the first phase building, does fall under a licensure umbrella. Yes.
Does the assisted living require a certificate of need approval?
In this state, I don't believe that's the case. No. Hospitals and skilled nursing may require those.
Yeah, nursing for sure.
Yeah, so in the state of Missouri, assisted living does. Lexington, Kentucky, it sort of does. It's a little in between, but it's not a strict CON like you might have for the higher acuity.
Have you done needs studies? I mean, is there a need/demand for assisted living and this kind of housing?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be here if there wasn't. As I said, we end up owning it and running it, and we're part of it, and it's our business. And so what we do, one of the first things we do is what I call a desktop study, where we're looking at the demographics, the demographic trends, what are the services that are already here, and how can is there a gap, and how can we fill that gap? I believe there's been a gap for a number of years. We were first here a number of years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, and when I talked about moving from 40 communities to 15, we took some time off and decided we would do that, and then came back and jumped back on it, and are very excited about providing these services for the residents and their families.
And I noticed that Dr. Aboud's name is on some of the documents. Is he a local partner or?
He is not. The reason his name's on the documents is he's the current owner of the land,
okay,
and we have the land under contract.
Okay, so you're purchasing the property from him?
That's correct.
Commissioner Wolf?
Do your other locations also have independent living buildings on them? Because I think all the photos you showed us were of the assisted living buildings at those locations, right?
Our other locations, we have villas. In Grand Rapids, we'll be building villas in the spring. And then in Ohio, in our prior portfolio, we had the villas. We have not had a freestanding independent living community. It's really not a very far leap from what we do, as you could see from the photos. It's really not a far leap from what we do now. The apartments will be bigger. There will be full kitchens in the apartments. And then there's a shift in the amenities that we provide. So we have many of our communities when we open, they function really as independent. We get a lot of independent individuals moving in, and then they age in place within that licensed building.
I noticed in your description, in your application, it caught my eye. You said that the independent living in particular may offer services, including but not limited to dining, basic housekeeping and laundry, and some other things. And I was trying to picture how you would provide the dining, especially to the villas, and the housekeeping. Is that really what is intended by that statement? You would offer those to the villas?
In the villas, yes. Now, the dining would be in the main building.
That would be the assisted living building, or?
Well, the assisted living building is there, yes, it'd be provided there. And really depending on what amenities they're looking for, whether it's housekeeping or any of the services that are in the main building, they can access, including the dining. Once we get to more of a critical mass of villas, also on the plan, there's a clubhouse, and that'll have a, wouldn't say a commercial kitchen, but a small serving kitchen, and activities and dining and things like of that nature can happen within that. And then also maintenance and the other some of the other services that we need to provide would apply to the villas. And then as the independent living building opens, that really shifts the nature of it.
And so would you be charging extra for those services, for those who wanted them? Things like the dining and housekeeping?
Typically for independent living, yes, because most people don't want it. Right. And so we don't want to charge people for something they're not accessing. And then it also depends on what's sort of the common fee structure within a community and what people are used to. But typically, it would be an additional charge for the people in the villas.
And then one more question, back to the house that's on the property. Is that currently occupied?
I believe so. I drove by today, and there were 2 cars there, and I don't really know much about it, of who's in there, but I believe somebody's in there.
All right. You don't know is that going to stay throughout phase 1, or? You probably don't know any of those
we haven't.
Yet?
We haven't sorted through that yet. I hesitate to say anything. We will not be doing anything up in that area in phase 1,
right.
But I don't know the leasing situation of that house. I can find that out.
No, that's fine. Thanks.
Any other questions? Well, for what it's worth, since back when I was on city council in 2012 and years after, in various work with Primetime Senior Program at the City of East Lansing, I can tell you there's been a constant call for active living for 55-plus age people. So I think your villas and the independent living apartments probably going to be meeting a real need in this community, and hopefully they're going to be the sort of setting that people have been looking for some time and not finding, so that they can stay in East Lansing without having the big family home that they've lived in for the past 20 or 30 years. So
that's our goal.
So
thank you.
Anything else from the applicant? All right.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Any other comments from anyone? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there anything anybody wants from staff before this appears on the agenda again? No.
I have just a short list of items that I heard through the discussion. That would be the double check the parking based on the phase and what triggers the SUP, which I think is extended care nursing, but we can include that in the staff report. And then I think the applicant indicated that they would be able to provide the revised phasing, including the additional villas. So those are the 3 items that I have.
The curb cuts?
Of course, that goes without saying, but yes, we will be sure to include that.
Anything else to that? Anybody think of anything else they want to know? All right, moving along then to our third public hearing, 341 Evergreen.
Great, thanks. So this is an application for site plan and special use permit for 341 Evergreen to modify the approved site plan and special use permit for the properties. This is part of the larger park district plan, including 100 West Grand River Avenue and 120 and 140 West Grand River Avenue. The applicant's proposing to add a 6-story to building C at 64 feet tall, and increasing the residential units from 72 to 99. With that, our senior planner, Darcy Schmidt, will
Thank
provide
you.
the presentation tonight.
This application is requesting a revision to Building C, which is part of a previously approved plan which included 3 buildings. These 3 buildings are shown on the television here. The 2 buildings along Grand River Avenue are located in the B3 zoning district. The building C is located in the conditionally B3 district, which will need to be modified for this application. As Mr. Haywood had mentioned, that application has just recently been provided to us, so we'll be bringing that through the process. The utilities in this area, the applicant will be working with the city quite closely. There's a much larger utility plan for this area that will not only improve the capacity for the development that we expect in the future and this project, but also for the neighborhoods to the north. So it will be an intricate process, so the applicant is continuing to work with the engineers to put that process together. The traffic analysis for this project has shown that there's less trip ends that will be conducted through this particular proposal. So with that being said, we will not require an additional traffic study, and it will not have to go to the Transportation Commission. The DDA will review this proposal tomorrow at their meeting. This particular project is not proposing any balconies or rooftop amenities. However, they do have a nice entry court in the front of the building that has benches and bike racks. The building, let's move to a different plan here. The building, as was mentioned, is proposed to go from a 5-story to a 6-story, 63 feet in height. The building includes, the first floor includes 34 parking spaces for vehicles on the first floor, 36 spaces for bicycles, and a foyer and entryway for the upper floors. The upper floors include efficiencies, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. I wanted to call your attention before I go too much further to an error in the report that is a bit confusing. If you can go to page 2 and 3 in your report to the charts. There, in the chart in building C and building A, it refers to occupancy in 2 different areas. That should refer to beds. And then there's also another area where it talks, where the heading proposed development, the second line and the 4th line refers to increase in 14 bedrooms. It should say increase in 14 beds. And the 4th line should say an increase in beds from 90 to 194 instead of bedrooms. And significance of that is pretty big. In the past, we used to have most of our plans came in with 1 bedroom, 1 bed. And the recent submittals we've been getting applications with 2 beds in some of the bedrooms. So we kind of got, between the previous submittals and this submittal, we kind of got a combination of both. So in trying to review that, it got a little mixed up. So really the chart was not attempting to give you an ultimate occupancy as much as it was trying to show you how the proposal changed from the previous proposal. And in doing that and showing you that error, I also think it's important to understand how our occupancy for the rental licenses are determined in projects like this. There's three components. There is the building code. Is the bedroom big enough for how many people? The second is our definition of family. Our family can be two unrelated, or a family as defined in our code, which is, it can be mother and a father, it can be a mother and a mother and children, it can be a father and a father and children, it can be grandparents and children, a number of combinations to be a family. So, and then the third is the applicant's definition or recall of the number of beds that each unit has. So, for instance, with an efficiency, that would be referred to typically with an applicant as a one-bed unit. Because it's a one-bed unit, it still can be occupied by a family or two unrelated persons. So at least two persons could be occupied in that unit. Typically, in most circumstances, it's one person, but it can have an occupancy of two. Same with the one bedroom. Once you get into the 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4 bedrooms, it's basically on the number of beds for non-related persons. So if it's 4 beds, it might be 3 bedrooms but 4 beds. It's 4 beds for unrelated, so you can have 4 persons or a family. So whatever that definition is of family. So that could be the same for 3, 4, or 5 and on. Does that make sense? Do we have any questions on that?
So our previous look at Building C, well, and Building A as well, didn't include all of this detail, right?
Yes, it did. It had
the number of beds.
It had the number of beds.
Calculated the same way?
Yep, so it was all the same. It just, now we have a situation where now it has more than one bed and some bedrooms. So it's slightly different. So the intent wasn't to show it with the actual chart. I wasn't trying to show occupancy as much as I was just trying to show apples to apples change. And so when you change those terms from beds, occupancy to beds, and change bedrooms to beds in the staff report, and I'll have it corrected for the next one, it will come out apples to apples, if that makes any sense.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
When you calculate the parking required under the ordinance, that is tied to bedrooms, right?
Bedrooms,
not
correct.
beds.
Correct.
Okay.
So
The parking calculations
Yeah.
are units, right?
they're by beds.
Bedroom, okay.
Bedrooms, I mean.
Bedrooms, but not beds.
Not
Bedrooms
beds.
per unit.
Per unit,
Okay.
yep. So with that being said, you can see that it would be very difficult for me to come up with an occupancy. And that, like I said, short of if council always has the ability to set that occupancy based on whatever factors they might come in to play with a development. However, short of that, that's how a net will calculate occupancy for each unit. So if it's a family that occupies it, it'll be different than how many unrelateds. So that being said, getting back to the comparison, so the original approval included 218 units in Building A and 72 in Building C, so apartment units. Building A was administratively approved to now include 197 units. Building C is proposing to add 1 story and now include 99 residential units. While the change to Building A reduced the residential units to 21 units, it's increased the number of beds to 14, which is not a huge increase. Building C proposal is increasing the proposed beds from 90 to 194, which isn't a huge increase. Well,
It's twice as much.
It's an increase, but for the two projects together, when the two buildings are together. So together, Building A and Building C are proposing 291 residential units, of which 74 of those units in Building C will be used towards the 25% which they have reserved for moderate income housing.
Before you go too much farther, if I understand it right, we are not considering the changes to Building A in this.
No, that's already
approval.
been approved.
That's already been approved.
Right.
Okay, so you're just giving us that as
I'm giving,
background.
because they have to be included together to come up with the 25% for
I see.
the, yes.
Okay, but all we are really
You're
going to
reviewing
recommend
Building C.
approval or not on is related to Building C.
That's correct. That's correct.
Go ahead.
That's it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer that.
Yeah, I think I need some more information about the parking, and I don't necessarily need it right now, but
Yep.
I believe the staff report references that the prior SUP, a part of that was a parking plan that had been
Yep.
approved, and I think it's planning who approves the parking plan, isn't it?
No,
Or is it
that,
council?
it's
Okay.
a planning commission.
Okay, it was the planning commission, all right. But you didn't attach what the parking plan is, and I tried to search
Sure.
for it on the city website, whose search engine is woeful, and I couldn't find it. So if, with our next report, if we could have what the parking plan was,
Yes.
and for how many units it applied, so we
What
can
the difference
compare
would be.
that. Right, so that we can compare that to what these changes will be. And all I see are less than 40 parking spots, so,
Yep. And I'll do a comparison of what this would be and what that would be.
and I don't even remember, did the prior plan have parking at Building A at all for Building C? Or was it just parking in municipal lots?
It just had building and parking A for parking. It just had the parking for Building A there and parking in Building A,
Okay.
but none for Building C.
Was there an excess, I mean, were there more parking spaces?
In Building A?
No.
No.
Okay. And how many were needed, do you recall?
I don't recall.
But more than 36 or 34 or
Correct.
whatever? Okay.
Correct.
So did the parking plan include off-site parking or?
It did, absolutely.
In city lots? Or
Yes.
in the ramp or whatever?
In the city lots, correct.
Right. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I know you touched on infrastructure briefly. Is Evergreen Avenue right here going to be torn up for this project to make infrastructure improvements?
I don't believe for this project, but we don't know yet because the engineer and the applicant are working on that right now, so it could possibly be.
Okay, and then with the way that this building is positioned, would that prevent any sort of transition to a pedestrian walkway as has been proposed? for
It
these
should
new
not
properties?
prevent that at
Okay,
all.
thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Commissioner Wolf?
Yes. This is a little complicated to explain. Let me try. If you go to page 6 of the staff report, that's where it starts the review of the special use permit. And this is a standard section that's always in the staff report. And it goes through the general requirements for a special use permit. At the bottom of page 7, it continues with specific uses. And again, this is a standard way you set these up, because for specific special uses, there are additional requirements.
Right.
So for this property, the first one listed is multiple family dwellings in business districts.
Correct.
If you continue on to the bottom of page 8, The next heading, number 5, is for additional building height. And that goes on through the bottom of page 9. But my reading is that this building does not require a special use permit for additional building height, because it is 6 stories, and that is
You're right.
the required height in B3. So if we're not trying to apply this to building A, which would have required
No.
that, if this is really only about building C, I don't think any of that applies.
I'll take a look at that.
Okay, but in addition, there is one other requirement that I couldn't find in here, and that is if, maybe it's here, if a building, normally a multiple, if a building in B3 is going to have residential uses, it must be combined with other principal uses, which are business uses.
Right.
And if not, if there are no business uses, which there are not in building C, right?
Right.
Then city council has to make a finding that it's providing a type of housing that's not generally
Right.
available, or that it's an appropriate transition between neighborhoods.
Right.
So I was thinking that should be in the report here, because we should be making a recommendation on that. And is it in here somewhere and I overlooked
No,
it?
I don't think it is.
So in a sense, that should sort of replace the portion about the additional building height. It's another special consideration for this property.
Yeah, isn't that, unless there's another section, isn't that under B4A, where it says it can be permitted in order to provide unique housing opportunities which are not otherwise available in the city? So,
And the second thing is if it's a transition, that the
Right.
two possibilities are listed right next to each other
Yeah.
there? Yeah,
right.
that's the one.
So it'd be under that subparagraph A. Any other questions?
But is that in the staff report there?
That is, they don't comment on this, but it is
That language
listed.
is in there?
Yes, it says.
Oh, okay, I couldn't find it.
It's on the very top of page 8. Except for multiple family dwelling units may be permitted as the sole principal use of a building to provide unique housing opportunities which are not otherwise available in the city center. Then it says you have to be commercial on the first floor. So there's an exception at the beginning of that. So
Oh,
it
no, that's-
may be elsewhere in the
Yeah, that-
ordinance as well.
Yeah, that's not the language. It's similar, but because there are 2 reasons, and one of them is specifically that the development would act as a transition between a commercial and single-family areas or something along those lines.
We'll take a
I
look
could-
at it and make sure it's in the next one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else? Is the applicant here?
Mr. Darcy took the hard part of explaining units, beds, bedrooms. I just need 2 of those. Sorry.
Anyone who
Set up.
speaks can actually fill out a card, that would be
Okay,
helpful.
thank you. David Pearson on behalf of the applicant. And as we're getting set up, let me take care of a couple of housekeeping chores. I was going to point out what the chair pointed out on the special use permit, the special requirement with respect to all residential, since as originally approved, the reason this building met was because it meets both. The affordable housing is unique in the city center, and the all residential represents the transition from the commercial, which is intended on the DDA parcels and on the at the Graduate Hotel, to the all residential, which is to the north and to the west in the neighborhoods that are adjoining. The other thing I would mention is that we did go ahead and apply for, it's called rezoning, but frankly what we're doing is it's the condition that was attached to the rezoning previously. I thought I had already covered this because I said that the condition was that it would be in accordance with, first of all, it would be combined with the buildings on Grand River in a single approved site plan, and that it would be a site plan approved by the city council, effectively saying, although you're rezoning it to B3, the only thing we can do here is what you approve as part of a site plan and any required special use permits. That seemed to convince some people that once they had approved a site plan that it was that one. So all this does is it would change the wording to say any site plan, and then to put a belt and suspenders on it, including any amendments approved by the city council. So that's the zoning change that will come to you, again, along with the requested site plan approval. Also, there was a mention in the staff report, and the engineer's report suggested that the plans didn't include engineering plans to be reviewed. The engineering plans were already approved as part of the submittal of all three buildings back when those were approved as part of the original site plan. And we sent a copy of that. I don't know if you have it with your packet as well, but the engineering plans have been reviewed by the engineer. I think when the engineer reviewed it, she was not calling to mind that Bob Shireman had reviewed them previously. With that introduction, why are we doing this? Because we think it's a better project and it's more likely to be successful. Based on what we have learned, what Convexity has learned since the original site plan was approved. First of all, we're happy to be here because a lot of people expressed doubts. They kept saying Building C will never happen. Building C is going to happen, and soon. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is that, frankly, as construction will be winding down on Building A, Convexity would very much like to work with Walsh Construction, and in particular with the people who are working there now. And the schedule that we hope we're on would permit them to do exactly that and to transition to this. The other thing is that one of the uncertainties is what's going to happen on the DDA property here immediately to the east. And we had been hoping that we would know by now. We don't. The DDA has an item on its agenda tomorrow to issue an RFP, probably 120 days, maybe another 30 days to 60 days to consider what it is they want to do. So we're not going to know. I think one of the things that Darcy mentioned is the staff is trying to put together a plan, I think, to get council to look at all of the utilities and all of the infrastructure changes and come up with a way for those to go forward so that they don't interfere with whatever's proposed for the DDA property, and we're hoping so they don't interfere with whatever happens on this property. As it is, well, I'll get to it when I explain the reasons for the changes. One of the things that we learned, frankly, is from MISTA, is that Convexity did not wish to use MISTA's programs for subsidies for tax credits. The difficulty is there's a long lead time with the application and when you know whether or not you've qualified and you're going to get any credits. The other thing they discovered is that in the last round in April, there were 25 applications, and I believe it was 5 that were approved. So you can go through the time and all of the planning and still not get there. For that reason, Convexity decided to just go ahead with the 80% affordable housing, which is what had been approved as part of the original site plan and special use permits. So you, in order to live here, you'll have to qualify by having 80% of the average median income for the area. That then caps the rent that you would pay. And one of the other things that we learned, which I suppose should have been simple and we should have known, was when you do that, in the plan that was approved, which was very heavy with efficiencies, studios, one bedrooms, with 72 units, there were only 92 bedrooms in the entire building. And frankly, the rent difference for the subsidy or for the limit is not that great. The standard rent for such a unit under MSHDA's guidelines would be $1,042. You can get the same unit at the Abbott that's under construction now in Building A for $1,250. So it's only about a 15% differential, not large enough savings to really drive the market. There's a lot of that available in the market. The difference when you go to 3 bedrooms, for example, is far more noticeable. So under the guidelines, the rent for a 3-bedroom unit would be $1,500. The same thing in one of the newer buildings that have recently opened or that are going up, it's $2,700. So the savings are dramatic. The other thing we learned from MSHDA is that the units need to be larger and the rooms need to be larger. But apart from MSHDA, the average occupancy that there would have been under the previous setup would have been about 1 to 1.5 people per unit. The average in East Lansing is close to 2.5 people per household. So it seemed to make sense to go more in that direction. So what the new plan would do is increase the number of bedrooms within the units, make bedrooms larger. So, for example, in a 2-bedroom, the 2nd bedroom under MSHDA's requirements, and although we don't have to meet them, they provided good guidance on how to lay the unit out, you've got to have room for 2 single beds. Because the point is, these are built for families. The change in the unit mix increases the number of 2 bedrooms dramatically, and then also adds 3-bedroom units as well. In terms of the overall occupancy, one of the things that MSHDA wants is to have a mix of types in the sense of subsidized and not. So if you use one of their programs, they would require that you have some 40% AMI, 60%, 80%, and market rate. Frankly, they want market rate in the building because there's, frankly, some stigma attached to that's affordable housing. If it includes a mix and it includes market rate, it removes that. This is not a building that's going to have a pour door as are done in some of the affordable required buildings that are done in larger cities. The idea is that there should be a mix, and that contributes to the building's success. What all of that meant was 2 changes. One would be to increase the footprint of the building, to spread it out in order to accommodate the difference in size. I think it's 2,650 square feet per floor in order to accommodate the number of bedrooms and the larger rooms that are within them. It also increases the height by 1 story, but by increasing the footprint, it limits the amount which we're asking for in terms of additional height. It would go from 72 units with 90 bedrooms to, I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's 74, and I believe, here it is. I don't have it, but I believe it's 140 bedrooms, if memory serves.
So that's
It's
194.
190.
So you said it goes from 72 units to 99.
Correct. And
correct?
the number of
And
bedrooms.
90 to 194.
No.
No, that's kind of, I think, what Darcy was touching on. Sorry, Chris Oakley from Quebec City Properties.
Yeah.
Where, as approved, there were 72 units and 90 bedrooms.
Yeah.
Okay, and we didn't really do a bed count in that scenario. As we propose currently, there will be 99 units, 149 bedrooms.
Rooms, right.
Rooms,
Yeah,
and then
okay.
194 beds. And
Right.
some of that grew out of, honestly, it grew out of the MSHDA requirements for any time you have a second bedroom, you need to be able to fit, 2 twin beds in the bedroom.
Yeah.
So, and I gave this, I had this, I can kind of share it if you care. I gave a copy to Darcy, for any report revisions.
So the other way in looking at the count of the units, as Darcy had mentioned, is that their Building A was approved for 218 units, and by the way, the occupancy ordinance, the 25% goes by units, and so there were 218. I believe they were reduced to 196. Darcy had mentioned 197, but we think it's 196. It doesn't really signify, because essentially what we've asked is a number, in essence, the excess of market rate units moved to Building C. We are adding 3 additional units in any event, because it would have moved 22, and we're asking for 25 market rate units in Building C. The other thing, frankly, that this change allows us to do is to make it a better-looking building. I'll let the architects tell you more about that part of it. Just to get ahead a little bit, in terms of the schedule, our hope is to get through the approval process for the changes, if they are approved, in December or January, to submit plans in February, and to start construction in April or May. So in terms of the staging, that's what the schedule would look like. The way the building is set up with the open space towards Valley Court, we haven't worked out all of that, but it looks like we would be able to do most of the staging right there on the site, rather than adding any additional off-site use. All of the utilities are planned to be connected to existing utilities, although there may be other utility work that needs to be done in the area. The building itself could be served by the utilities are there, and the stormwater could be taken care of on site. We were asked, and no, there is no proposal for any sort of stormwater retention in Valley Court Park. We'd be glad to answer your questions. The architects are here, and I guess I'd rather they go through the building itself and give you those details, and then we can answer any questions you have.
I do have a question before you leave, and that is, as far as certifying who's eligible to be a tenant under the income guidelines, is the certification done by the management company, or is it done by MSHDA, or how is that done?
Typically, it's done by the management company who's approved by MSHDA, and then there's an audit, in essence, every year. We're going to have to work out with the city how that's done in this case, because it's not under any MSHDA program. And although we're using their guidelines, there has to be some sort of reporting system so that the city knows that the property's being managed in accordance with those requirements.
So it's not really overseen by MSHDA, it's your pledge.
Correct.
The company's pledge to
Right.
make a certain percentage of these units available to people within a particular income.
It's within the income, and in addition, you have to set the rents in accordance with MSHDA's guidelines. And that's actually a combination of bedrooms and number of people who are there. So depending on the size of the family, the rent may shift slightly, even with the same number of bedrooms, but that's a fairly small change. But yes, All of that would be in accordance with MISHDA's requirements, but the reporting would have to be whatever is worked out with the city to make sure those are met. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Wait, before you leave, Commissioner Wolf has a question.
Yeah, do you happen to know why it's projected that the number of trips for this plan will be lower than the original? Because
I do, because
there are more units and more bedrooms, both.
The original was done when there were more units in Building A, and I don't know that there were more in Building C, but the traffic study was done for too many units. What was actually approved had fewer units overall than what was in the traffic study. We've only shifted within that, and so it doesn't make any difference in terms of the traffic generated.
And
that's how it came out.
There also was a pretty significant reduction in ground floor retail space. In Building A, in Building A it reduced, and then in the hotel it essentially went away.
Right, because they moved changed to the back off their, got rid of their retail essentially on the first floor.
Oh, we've got another question.
So you said construction is anticipated to potentially start as soon as April?
Correct.
And then what would the duration of that construction period be potentially?
Would be done by June of the following year.
Okay, thank you.
May or June of the following year. It's a smaller building, so it's not the same as buildings A and D, the Graduate Hotel and the Abbott. And the type of construction is also less intensive in terms of what they have to do there with the height and the cranes and all of the rest. Makes it easier.
Good.
Okay. I'll wait this time. No. Okay.
Yeah, it's Chris Oakley, Director of Design at Convexity Properties. I'll just touch on these very, very quickly, and I'll turn over to Mike. Like parking plan, you've seen this in your packet. Essentially, it's 34 spaces. I know there was an earlier question about parking and what we actually did in this plan. The proportion essentially traveled, increased with the unit count, but it's about a 1/3, to unit, slightly above that. That's what's being proposed in the current building. I think previously at the 72 units, we had 25 or 26 parking spaces. So that's simply that aspect of it. There was an earlier question, I believe, when Darcy was speaking about, evergreen infrastructure. I know we have to have these conversations with the city, but and I don't want to kind of, say something that is differently than what David said. I think what we kind of know right now from a water service point of view, we probably do need the increased main size in the main loop, in this vicinity primarily for the fire. Even if we did not need it in the building or we could compensate with our own internal pumps, I think it's needed for hydrant pressure. So that is something that we do need to talk about. The conversations about, the large elliptical storm sewer that, we had looked at quite a while ago, that is something that, specific to this building, really cannot be implemented because of the coverage. The grade of evergreen has to increase by upwards of 5 feet, when you get to the north end because of the invert and the elevation of that large sewer. And that's something that really needs to be done when this whole area is rethought. So we don't yet know how we're really managing everything in the building or how it actually gets implemented or when it gets implemented, but I think there are another layer of complexities with potential brownfield plans, whether it's, the DDA or whether it's what we do and all that sort of stuff, but we need to kind of work through that. From a planning point of view, there's been, a lot of conversation about, the bed count increases, changes and all that. And I think what we really kind of boiled down and learned was that where you may get the greatest rent per square foot on the smaller single occupancy units, they're not necessarily conducive, to kind of the moderate income world. And we made a even on the market rate for the Abbott, why we went from the 218 units down to the 196 that are actually being constructed is because when we actually looked at the other two, large properties in town, we found that they were very studio and one bedroom intense. And, there's a lot of new product, and, you know, we kind of felt the best way to differentiate ourselves is not to be offering the same thing. The larger, in the market rate world, the larger units lease up quickly, like now they're leasing up. The studios are more of a captive market for people that either are coming to school later, made commitments later, or planned poorly, you know, and they kind of lease up in the springtime. That's in that world, and that's why the primary reason why the building A unit count decreased. But, you know, this building, we do have a few studios. We do have, you know, kind of a reasonable number of one-bedrooms, but it's really a two-bedroom driver, and that's what we have the largest quantity of. And then, as David mentioned, you know, the whole notion of the MSHDA standards we used as a guideline, and because actually I felt they were actually very good. They were very definitive, but at least you know that there's no subjective questions coming later because of that. You know, lineal feet of counter run, size of closet, all sorts of things along those lines. But, you know, the one real driver is, if you can see it or not, is that having a larger second bedroom where you could put, not only could you put the two beds, but we felt it was important to have some sort of wardrobe divider so that if it were a family, it could be upwards of a family of 4, you could have 2 children of opposite genders kind of sharing a room for a while and things along those lines. Some of that planning led to, you know, led to the architecture and how some of the exterior expression was shaped. And I'm going to turn this over to Mike Breckloff from Fitzgerald Associates, who are the architects, the design architects and architects of record on the project, just to speak about that briefly.
Thanks, Chris. Put these up here. And are these also on the PDF by chance? I don't know if this controls
Yes,
that.
That should be a part of that slide.
There we go. So they're identical to what's on the board. So again, I'm Mike Breckloff. I'm a principal with Fitzgerald Architects in Chicago. And we've been working with Chris on this for some time. Just to talk about the building and the overall architecture and organization, it's very consistent with the fit and the site plan of the building as it was proposed earlier. That's the east face and the south face are sort of hold the urban edge of the context on Evergreen Street and how the parking lots to the south may develop in the future. And then it's an L-shaped building. The open part of that, the building, faces the park, so that creates an open space. I think it's complementary to the open space of the park across from that. In terms of the character of the building, it's, as we've developed it, we've tried to be, I would call it kind of a contemporary but neighborhood traditional feeling to it. It's got in terms of the way the materials are used, it's a base, a middle, and a top. The bottom 4 floors are brick masonry. There's a level of detail of kind of both projection or recess of some of the brick courses. The windows are, really follow the program of the interior of the building, so they're aligned with bedrooms and open spaces. They're generous in scale. They provide a sort of a nice sort of movement along the space. And we also looked at sort of providing a fair variation in texture of the materials. So again, on this view that I'm looking at right now, the view from the park, it would be brick on the bottom 4 floors where some variation between the bottom story and the 3 stories above that. The bottom story would have sort of a similar motif, but a larger scale of the light line ribbing that you see sort of horizontally between the windows. That would be a recessed brick. At the base, it would be a larger scale. The projected bays that sort of reflect some of the planning that we did to accommodate the larger units and create bedrooms. So those project out. They, again, add a sort of help with the massing of the building. Those go up to the top of the 5th floor, and so they step back at the 6th floor. And texturally, those we're looking at sort of a tauter, like a metal panel material, in contrast to the heavier texture of the masonry. And the top 2 floors, we're looking at a EIFS material that would have a smoother finish with a slight playfulness in the variety of jointing and some variation in color to again add some sort of texture and playfulness in contrast to the 4-story datum of the masonry base. One thing I'd point out on this view from Valley Court is lightly rendered just of what might be some screening for mechanical equipment at the roof. We've just had an hour-long meeting today to talk about mechanical systems with the contractor and mechanical subcontractors. We're not sure if that will be there, but we wanted to include it, that there would be screening if there is equipment. In any case, this is not based on a system that would have large ventilation grills on the outside of the facade. There'd be small ventilation points for dryer vents and or bathroom vents and small things, but there would be no large grills. We're still exploring what that system will be for the building as a whole, so there may not be any screening up there, but I wanted to illustrate that. Just to step back to the, this is a view along, looking north along Evergreen. So again, we like the building is consistent with how it's planned, where the east and the south face of the building sort of reinforce the urban character of that street, however that may develop along Evergreen, whether it becomes pedestrian or there are larger scale buildings across the street from that. The bays project in the neighborhood of a couple feet, and again, it's kind of a nice play of different materials to break down the scale of the building between that. Chris, anything I miss?
No, I don't think so. I think that the only, especially, thinking about this view and what I mentioned about, assuming when utility work happens here, you can start to think about what happens to this ground plane if it were to elevate, upwards of 4 feet. And I think part of how, we're looking at treating the base of our building with kind of the foundation planting and this nominal setback is, I think we're generally thinking we're going to start to berm up to the building. Our ultimate hope is that when something happens here, we don't have, new fill, kind of like, engaging the brickwork that we spend a little extra money, to do and things along those lines. So there is some thought going into kind of how this is all happening, but we frankly just need to start working more in earnest and getting a bit more information. I think that's it.
Go ahead.
So this proposal came before the DDA Projects and Infrastructure Committee, and a couple of basic, fairly minor questions. I'm trying to remember all of their questions. One of them was on the first level parking on the exterior. There are periodic what look like windows. They wanted to know if those were they functional windows? Could you see into the parking area?
I think it's kind of one of two things. We need to hold a little bit of air. The parking will be mechanically ventilated. It will not be naturally ventilated. And so probably on the north, north kind of east portion, we will need louvers, if the ventilation system kicks on to allow air in. We do feel, that some of these openings, allowing natural light into the garage is not a bad thing. They don't need to be, it does not need to be vision glass. It can be kind of a little more opaque, but the reality is it's the base of the building, and I think there is some articulation and some level of fenestration and opening that kind of, I think, ultimately helps the facade a little bit. So it's the intent is not for people parking their garage to have a great view. The intent is not for people walking past to be able to look in necessarily, but something's going to happen.
I was just raising the question to be prepared for that. I think you'll be at the DDA meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think what we learn about this from mechanically ventilating a garage, you typically need a lot less louver than you think you would. But I think there is a rhythm and there's a reason for why those little square openings are kind of like our rate on the building. If not a louver, it'll be something architectural.
Okay. And the other question was the entrance to the parking area. Is that a door?
That'll be yes, because we're not going to necessarily heat the garage. It will be tempered, so there will be some nominal conditioning in there. So there will be a door. That door will be kind of the access control. There will not be, kind of up-down gates. There will just be a door, probably triggered by a bumper sensor or something.
Thank you.
My question is this a project you can go forward on at a time when you don't know what is going to happen to the north of you on Evergreen with the DDA property?
Yes. I think, I don't know. We came into Grand River and Abbott after hearing there was like upwards of 12 or 15 years of stuff going on there. But the reality is, I think if we were to wait, until there was something decided and someone selected, and we'd hate to go through like a year and a half of waiting to find out that they couldn't move forward and then start over again. We do have an obligation to deliver a building on this parcel, like date specific, or, it's your parcel. And then we do think we are very happy with, the construction team, not just the name, but the actual guys doing the work, on Abbott. And we do think that, working towards a schedule, we can flow the critical members of that team onto this job. It's kind of like we're putting the band back together kind of thing. It kind of, hate to say it, kind of makes our lives a little bit easier. And I think David touched on the schedule, like, kind of these approvals, kind of pending, obviously, we want to be in for permit in kind of late February, and kind of then, get our contract terms nutted out with the contract and actually be under construction in April. That allows us to deliver, in kind of April, May of the following year, which is not necessarily on, kind of call it the student lease cycle, but it's relatively important to us. That kind of works well for us. It's about a 12 months construction on the building. So yeah, yes, we want to move forward. I think we're very interested in what the previous, team was proposing. I was waiting anxiously for them to call me and start asking questions, they never did. But I think with our access off Valley Court, there's always going to be some inconveniences for residences, but yes, we could move forward once we get into the utility conversation, or once we complete the utility conversation.
I think there was, did you have another question? Yes.
Yeah. Getting into aesthetics just a little bit. Is there a parapet wall at the top of the building?
I would call it more of a curb,
So it's very, very low?
Correct, correct.
First, I was thinking about the screening that you were talking about, and since I've been working on the form-based code, I've been more aware of some of these things, and in our forthcoming form-based code, none of the equipment on top of a building would be allowed to be visible. In addition, the building itself, the upper two floors strike me as kind of the weakest part. It's almost as though it goes up and it kind of becomes weaker, the design, and if I look at it a certain way, it almost looks as though the upper two floors aren't finished yet. They're still under construction or something. And then I kind of look at the edge and think maybe if that were stronger, if the parapet or the cornice or whatever up there were a bit stronger, it might help it look a little better. So I'll just make those comments for you to consider. No kind of requirement expected, but in case you're still thinking about design.
No, it's great. Thank you for the comments.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I also had one more question on the apartments themselves. Let's say about 3/4 of them, I think, in this building will be the income qualified ones, and the remainder will be market rate. Do you expect to determine which is which ahead of time, or how will How will that be assigned? Will they be by floor? Will they be interspersed? Will it?
No, I think we've kind of pretty much determined that, the top floor, the fifth residential floor would be market rate, and then there would be, I think, maybe 4 additional that would be kind of like spread through the building. I know in a
Okay.
narrative we submitted, we're not gonna pick all the 3 bedrooms and make them, kind of market rate. And I think because it is, the floors stack, the same unit dispersed on each floor, we would, work towards, the similar program, similar percentage of.
That was part of my question.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, so it would be, and that, so yeah, we take 1 floor, and then there are a few more units, that would probably occur on lower floors, that would also be more on the market rate side.
All right, thanks.
Any other, okay.
Yeah, a few real quick. Would those income qualified units, would they vary, or would they be designated units that would maintain that status?
I think they'd be designated that would
Okay.
maintain that status, yes.
And just a clarification on the lease term, would it be 12-month leases?
Yes.
And are any of the units going to be furnished?
Definitely not on the moderate income. On the market rate, there may be, or I think because there's so few units, we may simply be offering that. We would offer to furnish if someone desired so.
That's a good idea. And then for parking, is it going to be designated by unit, or is it going to be first come, first serve?
It's going to ultimately be first come, first serve.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else? And you, the developers don't have any experience yet with administering an income-qualified building like this?
Our management company does. So the same group we have for the Abbott, in different parts of the country, they've done it. And so some of the questions about how there's obviously, kind of a sensitivity to the data that's submitted to validate someone and where that information goes. No one wants to necessarily share what they earn with anyone reported to the city, from a qualification point of view. And then those income qualification levels, it's MISTA publishes them typically in April of every year. They change every year. What they publish is based on what HUD sends to them, so. And then there's a myriad of kind of rents depending on whether you are supplying heat or not, and all sorts of other things that ripple through from a planning point of view. But I think there should be a relatively fluid way to redact certain information and present certain information. And then the income rates, they change based on family size too. So it's, there are a bunch of kind of moving parts and pieces to these things.
And you're going to adopt whatever the current MISTA qualifications are?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know how else we would do it. Otherwise, we'd have to, look to David and his colleagues and say, like, who gets to live here? And I don't think they want to be the determining factor either, so.
Any other questions? All right. If there's nothing else from the developers, is there anyone from the public who wants to comment on this project? Somebody putting a sweater on, but that's it. All right, seeing none, then close the public hearing. We'll see this back with some additional information. Any old business? Nothing on the agenda? Commissioner concerns. Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, I want to follow up on some comments I made during the meeting to request that in the matter of special use permits, I would like to see in every staff report for a special use permit a statement somewhere near the front clarifying exactly what's requiring the special use permit.
I've already made the note to change our template to include that.
Okay.
So I appreciate the comment.
Thanks.
Anything else? No? Anyone else? I just note there's an article in this week's SETI Pulse, in fact, it's the cover story about whether there is or not, we've reached a student housing glut, so might be of interest to read. I read it before coming to the meeting. I didn't have any new revelatory information as far as I'm concerned, but it certainly does indicate that that's an issue that's on the minds of the community, developers, and city and local governments, so.
Yeah, the writer did collect some somewhat interesting information about rental prices. They gave some sample rates at different places throughout the city, and those were, they're somewhat anecdotal. It's not comprehensive at all, but they were still interesting to see.
And in the enrollment, he also had some enrollment information, or she, it's a Chris, so I don't know what she is. Had some enrollment information that was interesting, so. Right. All right, nothing else. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Downs, seconded by Commissioner Wolf, that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the same sign. We are adjourned.